Well, the time on the camera when I started doing Brad Jones's filmography ran out, and that was surprising because when I looked at the time that I had left on the disc I was recording on, it said about 45 minutes, so I thought I could get it all out. But, like Roger Corman, I talk too much. But I'm here to continue it now, and it's been a day, and I think that's good because I was very hyped and very energized, kind of, where I last left off with Brad Jones's movies, and I feel that might have caused me to overlook or miss a few things I want to talk about. And this next movie I want to talk about, I definitely want to get everything out that I think should be said. The next movie Brad Jones made after Midnight Heat in 2007 was called Game Boys. And out of all of his movies, I think Game Boys is probably my all-time favorite. And unlike his earlier movies, Game Boys is a comedy, like a straight-up comedy, and it works for me better than his other films. Like, I love all of his movies, but I feel like Game Boys works in many ways. Like, the others feel kind of had that feeling of a small film made by somebody and their friends. And they were very well done and had the gritty, violent tone to them. Game Boys feels like it feels very actual movie-like something you would see on the big screen. And there's a lot in Game Boys. Like, it's a romantic comedy, and as I said, Brad could pull off doing some romantic scenes in his other films in the middle of all the mayhem, and this film fully is about that subject, and it really kind of pulls it off. Like, actually, the whole film is, as the title would suggest, a video game movie. The whole movie centers around a bunch of video game geeks trying to hold a contest, and the main character, played by Brad, named Scott, is a guy who is obsessed. In fact, all the characters are obsessed with old video games, like ones from the 80s, on stuff like Atari and Nintendo. And it's through a lot of these internet critics that I found out what Atari is and saw some of the old-time Nintendo technology. And this film is probably a big nostalgic blast for people who grew up in the 80s and 90s and played with Atari and Nintendo, and it just shows them all playing it to their heart's extent, to their obsessive extent, because some of the characters, like, it shows that there can be characters who play video games and it's just a hobby, like their passion in a way. Then there are others who become just fucking obsessed to the point where you worry about them. But yeah, the main plot is that Brad's character Scott has been dumped by his girlfriend, who was never into the video game scene. And with his buddies, he tries to find a project to occupy his time so he doesn't start drinking out of depression, which apparently has happened before in breakups that he's had. And they come up with a video game contest for a very rare Atari game that is considered one of the worst ever made and is very hard to find. And Scott invites this woman he has a crush on, who is surprisingly, as this movie has in its universe, surprisingly is a huge video game geek like them, only with a vagina. And she works as a clerk at a video game store, and she's also played by Bianca Queen, who played the main female lead in Midnight Heat. And she does a very, very good job here. Like, she and Brad have some amazing chemistry in their scenes together. Like, you really believe them as two people who like each other and want to be something more. And the acting in this film, it is hokey and cheesy at times, but in the moments where you need to where there has to be some kind of actual effort or dramatic effect. The actors all do a very good job, and they pull it off. And it's amazing because Game Boys, like, when you see it, it actually is a very touching movie. Like, it has a lot of vulgar and funny, a lot of stupid, like, moments. Like, it is a comedy, but there is some very good dramatic moments in it, and or at least just some feel-good moments. Some great moments involving romance and friendship. It just, I really felt warm and nice after watching it, and it is my favorite movie from Brad, I think. All the other actors in this film are a guy named Alex Shryock, I think that's how you pronounce it, as Scott's roommate and best bud Ray, and he does a good job. Like, the character Ray is, again, a video game geek, but Scott is a guy who loves playing video games, is a little obsessed, but he knows about real life and how to be with other, well, he knows about real life, and Ray is really into it. He gets very angry about certain video games, but he still wants them simply because he has to own apparently every video game that there is, or he's just got a problem. But at the end, but still, he's a supportive best friend, and he and Ray and Scott, the characters in Game Boys, they have a very touching friendship. Like, kind of reminds me of some old friendships I kind of had, like supportive, and there's a moment where Scott just says, "I love you, Ray," after they've been through a lot, and that was a great scene of true friendship. And I don't care what people think, and I've never cared. Like, I've had straight friends, and I openly say I said I love you to them, and I know where the boundaries are, and they kind of got it, and we were all very open, so I really related to that part, and they had a great friendship. Like, I found I'm not fully relatable to all the characters and what goes on with them, but the character Scott, like, he's not very social, but he is good with people who have some interests as him. Like, he's more social than I am in many ways, and I kind of related to the idea of, like, being into one particular medium of entertainment. Like, I'm into movies, and these guys are into video games, and I found it to be a little relatable. Like, so these guys are can be real dickish and stupid, but most of the characters are very likable, and the whole reality in this movie is not real, but it's but it just has enough to make you feel relatable, or at least made me and probably some others. It's pretty awesome that I like this movie for me, because I hate video games. I haven't really played. The last time I was really into playing video games was when I was 10, and I stopped playing for so many years because I fucking hate games, like video games. They just drive me fucking crazy. Just nuts. And for the other people in this movie, Jake Norvell, who was the lead of sorts in Midnight Heat, where he played the cocaine-addicted detective. He's in Game Boys, playing a pretty big supporting role. He plays another friend to Scott and Ray named Steve, who is just as into video games as they are. Like, he knows what reality is, but he gets very obsessed with the gaming and shit stuff. There's a very cool scene. There's a fucking hilarious moment where he's just playing Nintendo, and he goes, "I don't know what I've been told. I can't beat this game with the code." That's my favorite line from him. And like I said, the whole movie is just like just comes at you like the Stargate from 2001: A Space Odyssey, just with all these old video games and technology that are obsolete now, and a lot of people my age probably don't know about. And the opening credit sequence is just a montage of Atari games and cartridges and consoles and Nintendo, and it's fucking awesome. It just comes by with a pretty upbeat song playing, and just feels like you're getting pulled into it. And throughout the film, they use all sorts of technology, video game technology, and it's almost educational in a way. Like for a moment, like it's all entertainment, but it feels kind of educational. Like you're kind of learning about this stuff. Like it introduces me to many things I never knew. I never tried any of this stuff out, but it shows me that this stuff existed and does exist still if you want to look for it. There's a scene where the characters Scott and Steve, they work to sort of put together this Nintendo toy. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it was very big apparently. It was called a Rob. It's basically a robot. Yeah, Rob the robot. And you play Nintendo and the robot moves and does shit. And it's a pretty cool scene where they're trying to figure it out, build it, trying to put it together. And they just, like, it's frustrating but also fun. Like, you could see why it would be so much fun to play with this stuff. And Jake Norvell, I really like him, and in everything I've seen him do, he's just so much fucking fun to watch, and he is a very good actor. Like, in Midnight Heat, he was very over the top and goofy, but Game Boys, he does a great job. The other people in this are Nick Foster, who was in Freak Out, Cheap, Midnight Heat. Freak Out, he was the wimp bitch assistant to Dean Corll, the serial killer. In Cheap, he was a pedophile cameraman making snuff films. Here, he plays another video game clerk that works with the female lead, Sally. She's the character played by Bianca Queen, and Nick's character's name is Art. And he works in a video game store, selling video games to people for very high prices or just simple prices. The prices in Game Boys, like, Game Boys came out in 2008, and some of the prices they have for these old-time games are surprisingly reasonable to some extent. Like, some games are only like $30, like Atari games are $30, and considering how old and rare Atari games probably are these days, seems kind of reasonable. But yeah, like the character Art is a video game store clerk, and despite selling it daily to many people who play video games, he hates them. Like, yeah, he hates video games. He just thinks they're fucking stupid. But I don't know if, but yeah, like, I don't know if the character Art is necessarily a friend to the others, but as a character, like, he's funny. Like, he's like the most reasonable character in this movie. He just sees how obsessive these guys get over these games, and sees how they make a big deal out of these games that aren't life or death, but these gamers, they just all see it as life or death. And he was fun. He doesn't hate it for the same reasons that I hate it. He's a fun character. I talked about Buford Stowers, who was in Freak Out and Cheap. He's not in this movie. He's not in Game Boys, but ironically and funny enough, there's a character named Buford in this, and played by somebody named Johnny Love. It was funny knowing that Brad has worked with this Buford guy many times, but he didn't use him in this movie, and this character, it's only a brief character. It's just a fact I wanted to mention. But yeah, everybody in this film does a great fucking job. Like, especially this actor named Jared Foyles, I believe. Like, he is a former collaborator of Brad Jones. Like, he plays this kind of like criminal who sells people stuff in the alley, and he sells video games to people. He used to video games to pretty much what a dealer is to heroin. Like, he sells rare games, and the idea is he's like a loan shark. You don't pay him the full. You can maybe pay him a little up front, but if you don't pay him later, he'll break your fucking back, blackmail you, just force you into prostitution, shit like that. Just he's a hilariously brutal character. Like, he says to these guys, $50 or 50 fingers. Last time I checked, there's only 30 between the threes of you. Yeah, like Jared Foyles. He does a great acting job in this. Like, pretty much everybody does a great job. There's this one character who's pretty insufferable, but he's written that way, and you're supposed to hate him. But yeah, the whole film was enjoyable, touching, funny, and just gave you a good feel. The whole film is like meant to be, I guess, for the old generation, a nostalgic blast, and for the new, just showing you what was once the big thing and people who are just still in love with those things. Kind of like some people today, like hipsters in a way. Like, these guys aren't hipsters, but they love the stuff from the past, and that's kind of like what they are. The video game that the main characters play for their contest to try and help the character Scott get through his breakup and possibly hook up with this woman that he likes. Like, the first half of Game Boys centers around them pretty much trying to find this game after all the breakup stuff, and the second half is about the contest and everybody just playing it like mad men and mad women. The video game that these characters all play and for this contest is one of the most controversial video games in history. And it's an Atari game and came out in the early 80s, like 82. And the game is explained in the movie, so I won't tell too much. Just the game was, believe it or not, there was a time in the early 80s where Atari made pornographic video games where pretty much you scored points by having the character on the screen just fuck another character, and like there were several of these, and this other web critic, it's hard to say if he's a critic, but there's this other web series called The Angry Video Game Nerd. It is pretty much a reviewer of bad video games, and there's an episode from that show called Atari Porn, where he just lays out all these fucked up games. Like, I saw this episode of his, Atari Porn, and it was one of the most head-spinning, stomach-turning, and eye-fucking things I've ever seen. Just the visuals of the shots of the game as he plays it. And in Game Boys, they play one of these notorious games, and this game is called Custer's Revenge. And I don't know if I should tell you all this just because it's all explained in the movie. They play a pornographic video game, and they show the visuals in the movie, and in the movie, because it's a comedy and it's well done, you kind of overlook the fucked upness of this game they're playing. So see the movie and find out what this game really is. And it didn't ruin the film for me. Like, I didn't really understand the game. I had to look it up to fully understand everything that it was about. But just watch the movie and you'll find all about this piece of shit. Okay, now that's over. Well, what else can I say about Game Boys? Well, like I said with Brad Jones and Freak Out, in the scene where he kisses the other man, and it just seems so hot to me, and then, well, in Game Boys, he kisses a woman this time, and the kiss scene is just as hot as in Freak Out. I don't know if it gave me the same ping, but at the same time, it's very. In this film, it's not meant to be like in the middle of a tense moment. It's meant to be a romantic scene, and Brad is just so cool to watch when he's being all lovey and romance. Like, he seems like a. He just seems. Even though, like I said, Brad's not a model, good looking type guy, but I think he's good looking, and you could really see him as a romantic lead, and he pulls it off so well in Game Boys. The romance is very great, the bromance is great, the friendships are great. Everything in Game Boys is great. The whole film is just so much fun, and like all of his other films, it's shot on low grade videotape quality. Either that or he did a good job of making it look shitty. Doesn't distract from the whole movie. Just it feels so good, and you know that these people, Brad and Jones, he got all these people are kind of, I guess, his friends, and this whole movie you respect it a lot because it's just a bunch of friends making a movie together, and what they pulled off is pretty amazing. This is the most movie of the films he's made. I guess one more thing that I could say, like I said in Midnight Heat, that Brad is just a great. He knows how to pick the right songs for his soundtrack and put them in the right moments. And there's a pretty inspiring because the whole mood of this scene I'm about to tell you is very inspiring in a way, and it may come off as a little fucked up, but I think it really feels inspiring to me. In the middle of their contest, the art character, like, he has been keeping score of the others play Custer's Revenge, which more or less has them trying to score points by having one character fuck another, and they're all failing to get past a few hundred points. And Art takes the game. He's been studying how they play, and he just takes the Atari and just goes out focused nonstop, and he gets past the highest score that was set back in the 80s when this video game first came out. And as it plays, the others cheer him on, and we hear the song "Don't Stop Believing" by Journey, and it just fits the whole scene so well, and it really has an inspiring feel to it. Like, it's an inspiring song, and put it with this not normal scenario, and it all works pretty well. If I had to rate Game Boys, I give it 9.8 out of fucking 10. This is the best movie Brad Jones has made, in my opinion. He does it so well, and there's so many great video game and movie references. It came out in 2008, and there's a scene where there are posters for The Devil's Rejects. Came out in 2005, and the Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez double feature Grindhouse, 2007. There are posters all over this room, and wow, and there's a scene in this room that's featuring all of Brad Jones's movies, where you see posters of his favorite films like Pulp Fiction, Dawn of the Dead, A Clockwork Orange, Zardoz, and there's a big. I think Brad Jones has a trademark of putting Caligula memorabilia all over the rooms in his movies. And, like, fitting, I guess, because Brad loves exploitation movies. His favorite film of all time, I'm not kidding, is Caligula from 1979. And look it up and you'll find out what it is. I love Game Boys. 9.8 out of 10. I love it, and it's my favorite. Just feels so good. It's just so fuzzy. Well, after Game Boys, Brad kind of went back to his gritty roots by making kind of a gritty film, but also comedic. Like, he made a half gritty, half comedic movie. It's on his website, like all these other movies, thecinemasnob.com. And after Game Boys, he made a movie called The Hooker with a Heart of Gold. And what's it about? Well, it's about a hooker who gets killed, and a mad scientist brings her back to life by cutting out her heart and replacing it with a mechanical heart made out of solid gold. And if you can wrap your head around that and just roll with it, you'll love this movie. And on his website, it's not a full-length type of movie. It's more like it was released on his website like a mini-series, and that's a way to look at it. Or you can just see it as one big long movie, because it's not mini-series length. It's like 2 hours, 22 minutes. Like, mini-series are usually 3 or 4 hours, but Hooker of a Heart of Gold, I would call it my second favorite out of the films Brad Jones has made as a director and writer. Like, this movie is both funny, but also very intense. It has some gruesome scenes of people getting hearts cut out of their chest, which are surprisingly graphic, even by Brad's standards. And the comedy is very genuine, and yeah, like this hooker, she gets brought back to life Frankenstein style by a mad doctor. And at the same time, the criminals who were kind of in charge of her, like her pimp and the pimp's twin brother, they and all their fucking goons are looking for her. And turns out they also have kind of a relation to the doctor as well, who put the heart in her. And it's a wild ride, it's fun. Obviously, this film probably looks like the most effort that any of these people have put into the movies they make. Like, there are many scenes outdoors, and you can tell by this outdoor scenery that this movie took a while to make, because when it starts out, it was apparently warm enough for the woman to walk around in the skimpy hooker outfits, and then by the end, the movie, there's snow everywhere. And the production is pretty good. Like, all these films are shot in a city area. I believe Brad lives in Springfield, Illinois. I don't exactly know where he shoots his movies, but all the landscape they get in, the locations, they're just very well used. Got some good characters in this movie. The hooker is played by one of Brad's many buddies, Sarah Lewis. And she does a good job. Like, she's got a very tough cuteness to her. Like, she's sexy, and she has a good edge, and she can be funny but also very intimidating. If you watch her in Brad Jones's online show The Reviewers, you can see that she can be very intimidating. But she plays the lead very well, and she carries her own. Like, she needs to be helped out, but she's still a tough, badass chick character in this movie. She's fucking awesome. And the doctor character that brings her back is played by Brian Lewis, and he does a good job. Like, Brian Lewis, He's kind of like Nick Foster a little bit. Like he can be kind of a wimp at times. Like that's just kind of his personality. But Brian Lewis, but he's not as hard. Like Nick Foster could be pretty insufferable at times. Brian Lewis, like he can be a wimp, and at times he can be a little grating. But you learn to kind of just roll with it, and he can be pretty likable, and he's kind of cute, like in a teddy bear way. Like he's a pretty big man, and Sarah Lewis and Brian Lewis were married at the time that Brad Jones directed them in The Hooker with a Heart of Gold. They're no longer married, but at the time, like in their scenes together, like in the film, the hooker and the doctor develop a very cutesy romance of sorts. It's pretty adorable the scenes they have together. Like there's a montage scene of them hanging out on a date, just doing many things together. And they go roller skating in a roller rink. They go eating at a place, and they also hang out on a playground. And there's a scene where he gives her a piggyback, and and then there's also next to all that touchiness, a really one of probably the funniest fucking image in the movie is when this woman who's kind of about my size, she gives him, the doctor, a piggyback. He just holds on, smiling. And it's funny because he's a really fat man and she's just carrying him like he's nothing, or she's just bearing it for the moment. But yeah, it was a pretty adorable romance. I loved watching it, and it was just great. And Brad himself, once again, acts in his own movies. And this time he plays two characters. And this movie is very over the top. Like it's probably one of the most. It's probably the most over the top thing he's ever done. Game Boys was a comedy, but it was a kind of a felt more like life comedy. The Hooker with a Heart of Gold is just wild all over the place, but it still manages to get that sense of humanity and drama in there. But at the same time, it's still way over the top. Like Brad plays two characters, one of them being a kind of a sleazy, misogynistic pimp, and Brad looks fucking ridiculous. Like, he wears this curly, long wig. It's not convincing, but he's more dress up in this movie than he's been in his others. And the other character he plays is this crime lord named, like, the pimp character is named Zalman, and the crime lord is named Steele. And the idea is Zalman and Steele are twins. Brad plays them both, and he's pretty over the top in both of them, but they're fun to watch, and Brad can actually be pretty threatening in some scenes when he wants to be. Like, it doesn't send chills down my spine, but still pretty threatening, his performances as both characters. Like as the pimp, he's over the top and crazy, and as Steele, he's also crazy but very menacing, threatening, and actually I'd say he actually comes off as just just uh just evil. And he makes this one character, another hooker, just makes her tremble because she's so afraid of him. But yeah, they all do a great job, and Ryan Mitchell, who is one of Brad Jones's many buddies, and also kind of the producer of some of his movies, acts in this as a character named Don, who's like a gangster, and he does a very good job, and he plays probably the most threatening character, like the character you feel the most threatened by just watching. And he's a pretty unlikable character, but has a few moments. But he's the most threatening character in this whole movie, and he pulls it off pretty well. He's just like He's just like an asshole who likes to push people around. Steele, like Brad Jones's other character, Steele, he is a bad motherfucker. And lastly, Jake Norvell returns in this movie, and he doesn't play as big a role as he did in Midnight Heat or Game Boys, but this is also probably the most menacing Jake has ever gotten in Brad's movies, and just plays like a enforcer of Steel, and Jake does a good job in his role. And there's a lot of action in this movie, like a lot of scenes of machine guns, shotguns, and it's obvious that they had to like put the flash on later, but that's done in a lot of movies, and it works. It doesn't bother, and it just adds to the tone and the way this film was made. It all works out just fine. The whole film worked out pretty well. The Hooker, the Heart of Gold, if I had to give it a rating, I'd give it maybe 7.8 out of 10. I'd say it's my second favorite. Game Boys and The Hooker with the Heart of Gold are my favorite out of Brad Jones's movies. And I like them all, and there are other films that he has made after The Hooker with a Heart of Gold, but he hasn't directed them. After Hooker with a Heart of Gold, Brad starred and wrote this movie called Paranoia, no relation to the Harrison Ford, Gary Oldman movie, and it was directed by his good friend Ryan Mitchell, who has wanted to start directing. And Paranoia, I watched it at the end of 2014, like in late December. I got it for Christmas. It's packaged in a DVD case, and like a real DVD case, and it has a look that shows it's not from a major professional packaging company, but it's still pretty impressive. When it arrived, the case kind of had a hole in it, or it just broke off. That's usually not a good sign, but I take good care of it, and I don't think that'll happen with everything, but yeah, and I watched it, and the whole film played just fine on my DVD player, and Paranoia was really, really... It set a good mood, like, it really set a good tone of just being confused, like the whole film, by the title, yeah, Paranoia, just is very... You feel very unfocused watching it, and you're unnerved at times. Like, most of the film is in the dark, and whenever there's a bright scene that comes out of nowhere, you're just like, whoa. And Brad, he plays a guy whose wife leaves him. His wife leaving him is played by Sarah Lewis. And it's about the night that she leaves, and there's a serial killer on the loose, and the town that he lives in, and many things happen that could either just be in his head, because he admits he has paranoia, or could it really be happening, and it has a pretty interesting twist ending. It's also one of the few films of his on DVD, because it doesn't have a major soundtrack of licensed songs, and this is the cover. I talked with a few people, and my grandmother, she pointed out the cover. He looks like Satan. And, by the way, that is Brad Jones, and there's a better picture of him on the back. That's him, goatee, mustache, and he doesn't look quite like that now. Like, these days, he's shaved his head, going bald. He's shaved it right down to the skin, and as you can see in this picture, he's a little chunky. But he's lost a lot of weight. Like, amazingly, like, I'm pretty in good shape. Like, Yeah, I'm in pretty lean shape, and he's skinnier than I am. And I have pretty good arms, but his arms are like just bone, and yeah, he's lost quite a lot of weight, and it's pretty like he was here, and then he's whoa. But yeah, and other than Paranoia, the only other film of his that's on DVD is called the Cinema Snob movie. That's kind of a spin-off of his online show. Although I haven't seen that one yet, just haven't gone around to it and trying to figure out if I should get the DVD and see it or just watch it online on his website. But it was once again directed by his friend Ryan Mitchell, and I'm interested in seeing that because got some good reviews, and I'm a huge fan of Brad Jones. I love what he does. It's helped inspire me to just try and do my own movie reviewing, and hopefully this all can expand to something else like it has with these guys. And I have a little joke to tell. Pretty edgy, but if you've been able to sit through my reviewing of Brad Jones, or if you've seen any of his work, Cinema Snob, or his movies, I think you'll handle this. Brad Jones's movies have a lot of swearing in them, and I love swearing in movies. And he uses just about every swear word imaginable. Fuck, shit, asshole, and hell, damn, just pussy, cock, everything. And he even uses some of the most taboo, as some of the more wimpish people use, faggot and cunt. And I like movies with an edge that use those words. But at the same time, I feel like for a guy who does such gritty movies, like he seems like he just shies away. He's too afraid to work in something where he could use the word nigger. And I feel like if you're gonna have faggot and cunt in your movie, then you should go all the way, have it all be equal, and include nigger in there. I mean, if you have a movie that has the words faggot and cunt in it, I demand that there be niggers. Well, that'll probably appeal to certain audiences more than others, but I just felt like telling a joke. Like I did kind of with Passion of the Christ. And now that I got my joke out of the way, my final thoughts on Brad Jones as a filmmaker. He is very good. He has limited resources and has to work with what he has, but what he has is pretty good, pretty big, and he knows how to shoot things well so that it's sturdy enough, and he knows how to act. He really does, and he has good enough actors. And the people, everybody puts in a good job, like on camera and behind the scenes, and I recommend everybody check out his movies, or if not, if you can't handle the hard stuff that he has, and if Brad Jones ever sees this video of me talking about his movies, I hope you like it, Brad, and I just love his work, and it inspired me. It makes me laugh, makes me happy, and this has been a lot of fun, and I don't know what I'm gonna talk about or review next, but this has been officially my 7th attempt at making a video, and I hope everybody who watches this likes this and wants to check out Brad's work. Boom. believe it or not. Snobs walking on air, never thought he could be so free. Flying away on a wing of a plane, who could it be? Believe it or not, it's the Cinema Snob.